we had a terrible tragedy, and she came up and she said that Donald Trump talked about radical Islamic terrorism, which she doesn't want to use. She used a different term because she doesn't want to use that term. She refuses to use that term. And I'm saying to myself, and it's a terrible thing, and he essentially shouldn't be running for office. He doesn't have the right to run for office. And I'm saying to myself, what just happened about 12 hours ago? A plane got blown out of the sky. And if anybody thinks it wasn't blown out of the sky, you're 100% wrong, folks, okay?
Donald Trump earlier this evening at a fundraising event in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. And we'd ask you to call and weigh in this conversation. The number to use, 1-877-NEWSMAX, 1-877-639-7629. Let's welcome back our panel on intelligence. A couple of intelligence guys from Holland, Michigan, the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Pete Hoekstra, and Skyping in from Washington, D.C., former CIA analyst Fred Fleitz. Gentlemen, let's go straight to the phones to Ormond, Florida for Bennett. Bennett, welcome to Newsmax Prime.
Thank you, sir. You're wonderful. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loudly and clearly. Go right ahead, Bennett.
I'm a big fan of yours, and I think I watched a program where you were out in the Southwest, and I suggest this theory about your jet airliner you're concerned about right now, that were there any lights or shiny discs or cigar-shaped objects in the sky? Did anybody see any high-speed objects? And I'm talking 50,000 miles an hour blowing off radar in just a bleep. And because when you study the last show or second to last program Ancient Aliens did about Antarctica, they sent a huge armada, one of the largest or the largest armada right after World War II.
And I can appreciate that. Let me bring it back to the here and now, Bennett, and let's talk to Fred Fleitz about what we have heard in terms of reviewing the radar. Any type of anything seen on the radar prior to the point where that plane disappeared that gave anyone pause?
Well, there were some interesting indications about how the plane had turned right and turned left and then did a 360-degree turn. This suggested that there was something wrong with the plane. Maybe there was a fight for control of the plane. Maybe the plane had been damaged by an explosion and the pilots were trying to regain control of the aircraft. I mean, something unusual was going on. And the good thing is, this plane went down in the Mediterranean. It did go down in a deep part of the Mediterranean, but I think we will get those black boxes very quickly, and I think investigators will know very quickly what happened.
To Stone Mountain, Georgia, where Jim is on the line. Jim, we welcome you to Newsmax Prime. Your take on the tragic events of earlier today.
Thanks, JD. I think it was blown out of the sky, but I'd also like to compliment the two gentlemen with you. I hope that when President Trump takes over, that he has people of their expertise that can, give him some. Give him their ability to get things done. I hope there's people. Of course, I know these two guys have already served their time, so to speak. But,
yeah. Well, I was talking the other day, Jim, about, I spent 12 years up in Congress. I said, wait a minute, that's almost like a sentence instead of a term. But you know what, Jim? Maybe Pete Hoekstra or Fred, if the next president needs a good director of the CIA, maybe they can have you come up before they testify for confirmation in front of the Senate. Would you be willing to do that, Jim?
Would. I think these guys are great, and I just appreciate their expertise.
Excellent. Jim, we appreciate you watching. Pete, let me go to you based on something that Fred said earlier. The chance that there was some sort of disturbance on the flight deck. We had an unfortunate, another tragic incident involving a pilot aboard Egypt Air. Years ago, it was believed he deliberately took down a plane. But I'm more interested tonight in the fact that there were 3 French air marshals on the plane. Would that in any way deter any type of disturbance on the flight deck?
Well, it would if people knew there were 3 air marshals on the plane, but one of the characteristics of air marshals is how closely they just integrate into the passengers on the plane. Sometimes it's very difficult to pick out exactly who the air marshal is. But, what Fred hypothesized, it's very, very possible. But I want to go back to a statement that you made earlier about when are we going to see some energized activity from this administration. I would say we've already seen it. This administration was energized to get rid of Mubarak, and they successfully did politically. This administration was energized to get rid of Gaddafi. And then in both cases, they allied with probably the groups that are at the root of the terrorist attack that we saw today, the Muslim Brotherhood. This administration believed that if they engaged with radical jihadists, they would change their behavior, and all we've seen is that it has emboldened them.
And of course, there's other action to keep in mind, the fact that they want to bring in, with minimal screening, all of the quote refugees from Syria, and we've already seen what transpired in Europe in terms of terror attacks there. Gentlemen, someone else who might be in line to offer wisdom and counsel is someone who we often see here on Newsmax TV. That's former New York Police Commissioner Bernard Kerik. This morning, he was on the radio in New York City with our friend Joe Piscopo, and Bernie did not mince words.
We should be annoyed and upset that we still don't have airline security rights. That should be a big concern. Because if you don't know today that these types of things are going to happen, you have to be a moron. So, the airline security is first and foremost in the transportation mode.
And yet, Fred, we take a look at Chicago O'Hare. For the past several days, there have been lines, over 3 hours waiting for passenger screening. We understand the TSA has been deferred to some screening of crowds for the presidential campaign. Is there any way to get a handle on this, or is the TSA hopelessly crippled in terms of providing effective airport security?
TSA staff has been dramatically cut. Now, I don't get it. I don't understand what the reason for that was. We see these long crowds. We hear security has been stepped up. And frankly, if we have fewer people screening these crowds, I think terrorists will be able to slip through.
Let's go back to the phones to Shane, who is checking in from Elizabeth, West Virginia. Shane, welcome to Newsmax Prime.
Hey, JD. How you doing tonight?
Fine, Shane. Appreciate your call.
No problem. I just wanted to weigh in. I was wanting to know, these gentlemen deal with the plane crashes quite a bit. And, I know it went down over in Madrid. How hard is it going to be to get the answers and be able to find the black box to find out exactly what happened to that plane?
Yeah, Shane, you asked some good questions. A lot of variables involved. Pete Hoekstra, our friend Fred was just mentioning earlier, this thing may have gone down in a relatively deep area of the Mediterranean. But what is your confidence level that the black boxes and other wreckage will be recovered?
I've got a high degree of confidence that they're going to find these black boxes. This is not like the Malaysian airliner that was lost somewhere in the Indian Ocean. You've got this plane on radar. They'll be able to triangulate and figure out relatively exactly where this plane went down. We'll get the right equipment in there. We can operate very deeply. We will find the black boxes, and once we have those, we'll be able to piece together exactly what happened. I want to go back to what you were talking about, and also what Bernie Kerik was talking about. The Western governments, we are doing moronic activities. You mentioned, letting these refugees in from the Middle East without any screening, knowing who they are, finding them jobs. This is going to be a huge problem. We're going to see much more of this in Europe. This is going to be a hot summer in Europe from a terrorism standpoint. You now have Paris, Brussels, a plane going down. This is the beginning of a long, hot summer in Europe. And JD, they're coming to the United States. We've got some of the same issues and the same problems. We're just a few more thousand miles away, so it's a little bit more difficult. But it's coming here, and Europe is going to have one tough summer.
A sobering assessment. Fred Fleitz, let me ask you, if you had made plans to go to Europe this summer, if you're from the United States, would you go ahead with those plans? We got about 30 seconds.
Absolutely, I would. I want to quickly comment on something else. What Donald Trump said, Wasn't it gratifying to hear somebody speak out and call something terrorism, to call them the way they see him, after 7 years of lies and equivocations by President Obama, a refusal to use the word terrorism? I haven't endorsed Donald Trump, but I thought it was refreshing.
Well, the one gift that Mr. Trump has, and we've heard it from a variety of people who say, you know, he says what I'm thinking. And when we think about all the political correct conduct, and Pete, we can remember our time in the House when we were always counseled, now be nice, be nice. You know, there gets a point where people just want to hear it as it is. Gentlemen, our thanks to you for telling it like it is. We will return with more. There's a lot that's been happening, a lot to talk to you about as we continue taking your phone calls at 1-877-NEWSMAX. Bob Vanderplatz joins us next.